right. Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce Maria Carolina Ceballos, who is a Colombian book artist with an emphasis in bookbinding and artist books. She holds a BFA in visual arts from the Universidad de Bogotá Jorge Tadeo Lozano and a minor in photography from the same university. In 2021, she graduated from the MFA in book arts at the University of Iowa, where she also worked as a book conservation technician and a digital book design instructor. She has also worked as a paper conservator at the Archivo General de la Nación in Bogota and as an independent book artist under the name of Canto Press, with which she creates artist books, teaches bookbinding, and sells hand-bound goods. She has been the recipient of recognitions like the Caxton Club Grant Award in 2020-2021, an MFA degree with distinction from the University of Iowa Center for the Book, and the Holly Award 2022. She has exhibited her work in various cities in Colombia, the United States, and Japan. And some of her books can be found in collections at the University of Iowa, the University of Miami, University of Michigan, the University of Alabama, the University of California, and others. I will now hand it off to Maria, and we will have a Q&A portion at the end, which I will moderate. We already have a question. We will be able to see this video later. It'll be on CBAA's YouTube channel. All right.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for joining. I am going to talk about research that I've been working on for really a long time, maybe since 2015, but really like as what you will see like since 2019 probably, when I was doing my MFA. It's a research about how performance arts and book arts can be joined by history and also, of course, by like experimentation. I have a background in music and I'm mostly a singer, so I will mostly talk about singing artist books, but I also have some research with body expression and other performance arts related stuff. And my plan for today is just to show you some of my books, the books that are like more descriptive of this research, and maybe perform a little bit of each so you can see how this universe in my head works. But also I don't want to perform the whole thing because I want to give you also the opportunity to maybe think about different ways these books can be performed. The books I'm going to show are thought to be performed. I'm not saying that other artist books cannot be performed, of course, right? Like what the reader does and what the artist thinks of their piece is so different. But these pieces I'm going to show you are thought to be performed, and it's like very obvious what I want to do, right? Okay, so let's get started. I'm not going to show any presentation. I just want to show you books in real time. So this is a different format, I guess, but I wanted to do it this way. Okay, so this book is called Scores by a Wanderer. Is in Spanish and in English, and I made it in 2019. So I mentioned I started this in 2015, sort of, because when I did my BFA, my thesis was like an installation where I would perform some drawings that I had on the walls, and they were notation for performance. So that's when that research with arts, like visual arts and music started. But of course, during my MFA, I discovered the book, right? And the object of the book and its history with music notation and also its versatility Books are also objects that move in time, same as music and dance. So it just made sense for me to put those two things together, and I try to make it like to make it come up like very naturally. Hopefully it works. Okay. So, as I mentioned, this is called Scores by a Wanderer. It's printed with type, and it has some instructions. You will see that most of my books have instructions for performing. Again, I'm not saying this is the only way this could be performed, but it's just a peek of what, again, what I was thinking of when I made the book and what would make sense for me with the notation I invented for this book. The instructions come in both in English and Spanish, so it's just a French fold. And if you want to read it in the other language, you just flip it. So I'm gonna read just a few parts of this. This is a book about contemplation and wandering in nature, which I had the opportunity. I mean, that's something I really love doing. And when I was in Iowa, I had the privilege to do it like pretty often, because we had like many parks and things that we don't have here in big cities like Bogota. So like the sunrise behind a mountain or a walk on the snowy city, read this calmly. Never raise your voice too much. Okay, so that's like the first instruction, right? Never raise your voice too much for this book. I have other books where I can scream about, where I can like whatever, but this little book, it's sort of small. This is like for contemplation. And of course, it comes with all the instructions of what the symbols mean. You will see the notation is very specific, and it's inspired in Gregorian music notation and modern music notation, but also I wanted to invent something different. And so this is the notation. I wanted to make lines to make it look like a drawing. I wanted it to be very line-like, and you will see in other books it's not the same. I always try to experiment also with the medium. So for example, here this is with polymer plates that I drawn on the black films thing that you can draw with. I don't remember what the name. And then I just made the plates. And so, and of course the text is moving type. And so I wanted to use that line that this medium gave me. And each symbol means something. As you can see, the text is in both Spanish and English. And the idea was to perform this book with two voices. So each performer would have one copy of the book, and each would read and perform one line. So it would be in Spanglish, sort of. And what I will do by myself will be very easy to understand. But the idea is that when it performed with two voices, the text kind of becomes muddy and confusing. You know, like when you're walking in nature and sometimes all these little noises start like mixing together and you can't tell anymore the difference between one thing and the other, right? And it's like very specific. I thought it like in very specific ways, right? And it also came with these little instruments, handmade paper instruments that would give specific sounds that inspire nature. So for example, this one is of course, for dry leaves, because we're walking in nature and probably you have some dry leaves around. And so I'm going to read just this spread just to show you sort of how I thought this. Again, this is for two voices, but I'm just going to read the English part. Later, you will hear lots of Spanish because I have lots of Spanish and Spanglish in other books, but this one I will read in English. to listen. Steps among crunchy leaves on the autumn soil, or on the mountains dressed with dry grass. New paths are raised from the fresh morning with choirs of love and ephemeral percussion. So this is just a little bit. I will do the same with other books, just read a tiny bit, because otherwise this will take like 3 hours. But yeah, like, of course, these are books that I made and also I'm performing myself. But I really hope one day people like other musicians, other singers, other book artists might perform my books and to listen something different, you know, the interpretation of someone else, because this notation, even though I have instructions, this is like very broad, right? I give space to the performer to like change and experiment with what they see and what they read. Okay, this is Scores by a Wanderer. And of course, during 2020, I took a little break from making books, but I also started thinking about my thesis. And I made 2 books. They're both very different, but what they had in common is that they are, again, for performing. So this is one that some of you might know already, because I read it like a month ago. And this is called Un Libro. It's a research about bookbinding and the body of a bookbinder and how this discipline and this craft changes the body of a woman bookbinder like myself. It came with 2 copies of the book because this is for, again, for 2 performers. One dancer who has this standard copy. And this edition, it was an edition of 5. It's sold out, but I still have copies of this standard edition. And it came also with a artistic bound copy with like more details. Again, of course, experimenting with the binding to show the different parts of a book. So that's why you see this exposed sewing supports. That was very intentional. Again, it has this relation with the body, so I wanted to look sort of body, like a body, you know. And so, well, I'm not gonna dance, really. I'm gonna try and move my body. My sister is a dancer, a contemporary dancer, so she has performed it a couple of times. And for my thesis, she actually recorded herself and I recorded myself separately. And then I made a video with the 2 recordings, similar to what I'm doing right now. And sometimes this person who dances is a body. Sometimes she's the book. Sometimes she's my body. Sometimes she's someone else's. And so that dynamic changes, and the way she moves, or the person, how the person would move would be different. Again, would love to see this performed by someone else different than me and my sister. So hopefully one day. Okay. Again, this book has instructions, but this is a more traditional book. It has the form of a more traditional book because I'm talking about the book, you know, like the history of it, the making of it. So I wanted it to be like very traditional with the usual parts, you know, the usual layout. But it has this little thread and plays games that you'll see more later. it has like a product that where I mention like why I made this, and then the instructions. Again, this is very broad, and here I say you can read this however you want. Just follow the some instructions that come up in the text, but also just feel the text is a poem, and so maybe with your voice, because what I'm trying to look for in these books is to have a recitation that is very performatic, right? Sometimes I sing, but if the performer doesn't sing, maybe they, I don't know, like maybe they do other things with their voice. And also I tell the dancer, move like what you're seeing, and move like what the threads and the shapes are telling you. So, for example, what I told my sister was like, yeah, like follow my reading and what I'm saying, but also look at these little notations that I give you during the text and move your body like so, because I feel like thread and a person's body can move so similarly, especially a dancer, right? Like this fluency, this softness, but also the hardness, the tension, and fortunately she understood perfectly. You can, well, if anyone is interested, I can send a link with that. I think probably somewhere in Vimeo. So this edition also has some photographs printed on Japanese paper with some real thread, because everything you see is scanned and printed, digitally printed. And well, as you see, the thread is like moving in different ways, and the voice too. Let me see, in some areas I hear susurrado, like whispered. I tell the reader to whisper, and I really want that there. But otherwise, in the rest of the poem, it's more free. But again, the reader can also just read those threads, I'm actually gonna read some of that second part that's about book conservation and my experience with soon to die books, right? To leave traces. La impresión que deja la tinta sobre el papel. It will be like the time of my aging that my parents will never witness, que nunca van a ver. Mis arrugas moviéndose, volviéndose los trazos que me identifican, así como tus manchas, your folds, las huellas dactilares y las páginas favoritas. Y los pies versus the head. Y tus endbands descosiéndose lentamente, rounding back on time. You in a box, worn and untouchable. Me in a box, old and untouchable. This second part is like more morbid and maybe sad, because I'm talking about the body that becomes old, but also the book that grows old, right? Well, that's this. As you saw, this is in Spanglish, because another part of my research that I forgot to mention is that I'm always researching and looking for the best language for performance. And of course, during this time, I was living in the US, so my brain would be all over the place with language. So that's how musicality of language would sound to me in my head. Different to, like here, it wasn't random. I would look for the best sonority, the best sound, the best, I don't know, emotion for the word I wanted to say, but also the best meaning, because something beautiful about bookbinding is that terms, of course, change between languages. So I play a lot with those words like feet and head, but head and tail of the book, that are different both in English and Spanish. So, so yeah, I was looking for that meaning game, but also I was looking for musicality in the text, and people who understand English and Spanish enjoy this book, I think, because they feel that flow of language that's very easy, but also very, very tonal, has a lot of musicality. Okay, that was Un Libro. And then the other book I made for my thesis was this little guy, which I'm gonna try and not make a disaster here. Just to show you the name, Fragmentos de Lluvia. This is like a bag, a big bag. Let's see. Okay. So again, this edition had just 3 copies. Each copy came with, in this huge box, of course. I'm gonna try and show you the whole thing. Each box would come with instruments made with handmade paper. This book, Fragmentos de Lluvia, is like fragments of rain. It's about rain, but also water. And so it just made sense to use paper, handmade paper, as the main character, of the book, of the making of the book. So everything, or almost everything, is handmade paper except for the board for the box and the few areas that have cloth, but the rest is handmade paper. And this is a piece for choir. So this box comes with 3 copies of a score, okay? And 5 different instruments. I'm gonna play for you all the rain instrument. Sounds like little drops of rain, but also has this little maraca-ish thing. It came with this little, I don't know, thing that you eat. And because when I perform this, I've been the director, so I usually have that one to like keep the tempo. It has these dry leaves again, but more satisfying because this is overbitten abaca. So I'm trying to here to look for the performatic potential that handmade paper has, Even here, I have a friend who taught me how to make jumchi, but I made it with abaca. So I would take a thick piece of abaca paper and just work it as much as I could to make this cloth-like material, and the sound would be like a thunder. So each performer has a voice, of course. They're either a soprano, mezzo, tenor, or bass, but they also have an instrument. I would give the instrument to the person who can play the best. So some of the instruments require some rhythmics, and some others are more improvisational. Sorry. Okay. So I'm gonna show you a little bit. This is the score. I also made other 9 copies of the score to sell like by themselves. All handmade paper with moving type and some poly. Oh, I forgot. Because I needed a lots of Spanish, and we didn't have the moving type for that. So I had to make it digital and then do the photopolymer. But of course, it's printed in a Vandercook. Even the instructions. So instructions again. And for this one, I wanted to make very specific instructions again. Not like un libro, right? In the last one, the previous one, I was like, improvise, please. Here you can also improvise, of course, but I want to tell you what each singer has to do. Why is this for, this is for 4 voices, a choir, and 1 reciter or a lead singer, which the couple of times I've performed this, of course, was me again. But again, I would love to see someone else performing this. And it also comes with the key for what each shape or drawing means. And you can take it out just in case if you are the performer, you can like look at it whenever you need to, even if you're not in this page, right? Which I'm going to leave out for a second. And okay, there are instructions for instruments and also for voice. So this is a book, but it's also a score, a music score. And this is like very obviously a music score. And I thought it that way, right? It sits in special collections for artist books, and I love that. But I also hope that someday a musician looking for fun stuff will find it and, you know, perform it. Would be nice. It's divided in movements, like any score would have. And all the imagery is with handmade paper. I mostly used ball painting and some portrait with watercolors. So for example, my instrument, which is the rain, is this little drawing here, like these 3 thingies. So whenever you see this in different sizes, you have to play this with different intensities. And because the text is about rain and like nostalgia for the rain that I have here in Bogota, it would have that as atmosphere of rain that comes from afar and then comes like really hard, and then those little drops, all those stages of rainfall. While I'm reading this, here, for example, I ask for the performers to touch the book. And I remember every time I direct this, they will be like, really? Can I touch it? Yes, please do. Of course, keep your hands clean. But whenever performed, it sometimes asks you to touch. Because another reason why I choose handmade paper is because this specific abaca, flax, and a little bit of cotton would give me is this sound of like this dry, harsh sound. Some of the spreads open more widely, double spreads. And so the idea is that 2 performers have this book in their hands, and they help themselves with the opening of the book. The size, pretty big. This is like 14 inches by 20, no, by 20, I think. I don't know inches anymore. Closed. Similar to the size of cantorales or choir books from medieval ages. So that was sort of the inspiration for, like the formal inspiration for this book. But of course, the graphic scores that you see are inspired by more contemporary musicians and artists. But also I feel like during the Middle Ages, there was a lot of experimentation on music notation, evidently, because when you see these books, they have like so many different like evolutions of what we now think of music notation, right? So it has happened always. We just ignore it sometimes, you know. Some of the pieces you have to remove and look at them with light against, with light from behind, which I cannot do right now. So what I'm gonna read you a little bit, I'm gonna try, because obviously this is for like 5 voices and 5 instruments. And I'm just gonna play 1 instrument and 1 voice. But I'm gonna try and perform here because I have my little instrument. And all these circles that you see are blows that the singers do, like whispers, and they start feeling like this dense air that surrounds you right before rain comes. So there is a crescendo, then diminuendo. Soy el anuncio de un velo transparente que llena los ríos y los pozos, entre raíces y musgo extendiéndose en el suelo, construido con pájaros, llamando, agrupándose y alejándose en rituales de tormenta, as wind comes and moves the branches. There is again an experimentation with language because, again, during that time, and part of my thesis was that how language behaves, and not just, of course, obviously a spoken language, but I feel like the body and the voice are also, of course, languages, you know? So music is a language for me. So how that and the Spanish and English can like make up this music, but also read themselves in the book pretty nicely, right? So it wasn't random again. And lastly, this is one of my most recent books. It's called Roturas, which is like tearings, the tear of conservation when paper tears, you know, that's a rotura. Also, those tearings that happen like inside the book, like with the thread or by bugs. But also it's a metaphor for my skin. So I've gone through an anxiety process for the last couple of years that involves my skin, and this was like a way of like letting all out. And it comes in with these 3 pieces. This piece that you cannot see pretty well, because again, you have to see with light from behind. It's like a river. This hand embroidered. It was a mantra for me to become more patient and to accept my body in that silent place, which for anyone who has gone through anxiety knows it's very hard. So this book it has 22 copies. So I embroidered that. I am embroidering that 22 times. I'm like in 12, maybe 13. And the main piece is the book. It's a scroll. You place it here on the little box. You can also spread it the whole thing, but it's pretty long and hard to roll. So this was easier for me. And as you can see, well, first is in Spanish. Let me put this closer. But also it has these lines that, so this book I thought I wanted to perform it, right? But I didn't think of it as a piece to be performed by other people, in the sense that you can read this book easily and enjoy it and feel it without performing it, like I will do in a couple of minutes. But for myself, I think I needed it. And of course, if anyone would ever want to, they can perform it. There are not instructions for this. Here I wanted the person to sort of guess what these symbols meant, because I feel like each person's anxiety process is different. So here, for example, I will use my body a lot and my skin, but for someone else who goes through maybe insomnia or whatever, they would perform this differently. So there are no rules for this in any way, and I feel like this comes closer to what sometimes we think of artist books that are more experimental, but also that you have to digest yourself as a reader, right? Like, it's so different from a normal book that has these rules of how you have to read it, and how you have what's the proper way to perceive it, you know? And here I wanted like to think about something different. I'm just gonna read oh, this is all digitally printed, scanned, and so it's handwritten and hand drawn, but then I scanned it and printed on Japanese paper for printing. It looks nice. I wanted Japanese paper because it's so strong, but also looks so delicate. And I want to think of my skin like that, very delicate, but in reality is very strong, you know. El cuerpo crece y se alimenta de sí mismo, húmedo y elástico. Se estira y se acurruca. Corre y se sienta. Recorre todas las posturas, todas las velocidades, todas las pasos, los asientos. I got stuck. El sexo, el alimento. And then there are, I don't know what's happening. There are these paintings, like metaphors of what I feel in my skin. And during that process of overcoming anxiety, so this river, you know, this is like a river, but also like looks like nerves. And why a river? Because water is like what makes you feel good during those attacks, right? Y se vuelve a romper con sus propias manos. Se olvida de sí mismo. El rasguño es una amnesia. El placer condena al recuerdo a vivir en el dolor intenso. Superficial, donde el aire, el frío y el sol duelen. And then this image of, I made it thinking about like that the soil that starts breaking when it's too dry. And also, of course, reminds me of my skin, how it kind of breaks in that same way. Also, this is the proof, so that's why it's so wonky. It's my copy because it came up pretty weirdly, as you can see. But well, yeah, this is my last book thinking about that performatic potential of artist books. I've worked on other books during the last couple of years, but they read more in silence. They are more for the reader and the experience of a book, which I think is also important. I feel like sometimes the book needs to perform itself without the intervention of someone like me, right? That has this intention of the performance all the time in her head. So some of like all my other books are more experimental in form, but I don't really think of them as performatic tools for this research I'm working on. But again, it also depends on the reader and the perception they have on artist books. I feel like kids, when they see artist books, their universe and the way they perceive these kinds of objects, it's so performatic, and we don't even think about it, or they don't even think about it. So yeah, I feel like artist books and performance will always have a link. But I guess it's also because of my perception of the discipline, you know. But well, yeah, that was all. If anyone has any insights about what I just said or questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to turn off your mic or turn on your mic and ask any questions or put it in the chat and I will relay it to Maria. I can start off with a question while people are thinking. I don't know if I'm just not clear. Do you have also a separate performance and singing practice that's separate from your book practice, or do you see the two of them linking like always
Well,
together?
I'm also a songwriter. I write songs, and but lately I've been feeling more comfortable with the books, performing the books. I don't know if it's because it's something different, and so I don't feel too judged by, people who know. Like in music, it's just so hard to, because
Mhm.
there are so many people doing the same, you know. And I try, of course, and I love writing my songs and everything, but lately I enjoy more performing my books because I feel like there's more space there for experimentation and also to like explore myself in different ways.
Mhm. Right. Oh, you have some nice comments coming in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, if anyone is in Iowa City, I think from next week there is an exhibition on paper making and sound, which is totally, completely linked to this. And Fragmentos de Lluvia, the big book, big book will be there, and there will also be an audio with the performance. So if anyone wants to hear it, that's a good. And also you can see like pretty amazing stuff.
When is
I think
that open now or it's opening?
I think it opens next week
Okay.
until I guess the last week of July, I think so. In the visual arts building from the University of Iowa, if anyone is around,
Awesome.
or if anyone is going anywhere near to Iowa. To Iowa, yeah.
Do you have, I know you have some documentation. Do you have documentation of you performing most of your books?
Yeah, I have a video of Fragmentos de Lluvia and Un Libro, which are the thesis books. So yeah, I could send you the link and you can give it to anyone interested, or anyone can also email me. I don't usually post those videos like very broadly because I don't know. I don't want them to be like viral or like famous videos anywhere. So but yeah, the others I don't think so. I think once I made a video of this one, the first one, but just myself. And I definitely want to do it with someone else for the two voices. That hasn't happened yet. So if it happens anytime soon, I will record it and let everyone know on Instagram, probably. Yeah.
There's one question. Do you know Elena Buriolo at the Center for Book Arts in New York City? I took a workshop with her called The Pursuit of Time Within the Book. The way she thinks about book art would resonate with you.
I haven't, but I just screenshot that that comment because I will definitely look her up like in 20 minutes. Thank you. Great.
I was also going to ask if you know Savannah Bastillo. She also makes books that relate a lot between English and Spanish. Um,
I haven't, but let me take a note.
yeah, she's going to be starting at Iowa in August.
Oh, that's great. Oh, okay. So I probably will see her
Yeah,
stuff
I
in
think some of your books would really relate to each other.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
they're not as much as yours and not most of her books, but at least the one which was in our MCBA prize exhibition in 2022 had a performance aspect for the reader.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that name sounded familiar. That's why. Okay, yeah, look her up. Yeah, nice.
Any other thoughts or questions before we close for this evening? All right. Well, if there's not, thank you so much again, Maria. We'll be taking a break with the book art series for the next 2 months for the summer, and we will start up again in September with 3 more talks in September, October, and November for 2024. So more information will be posted on those on our website later in the summer. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. That was really a really special talk, Maria.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank
I
you,
really appreciate
everyone.
it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting.